Hello, and on the gaming table today, we're taking a look at some more Warmaster battles. While I've been here in Dunedin, I've caught up with a couple of my friends who've got armies, and we decided to put on a couple of quick Warmaster battles at regular scale, not mini Warmaster like I've been doing recently. So first up, Dave brought his new Araby army along and took on my Tomb Kings in a 1500 point battle. Here's the armies arrayed out. You can see Dave's are very nicely painted figures on the left here. I loved his carpets and especially the elephants. You'll get to see pictures of those later. The Tomb Kings army on the right, that's actually all original Games Workshop metal figures that were in blister packs for a long time and then got painted up last year. So we deployed out and the Tomb Kings took the first turn and it started to advance, although their centre was lagging behind a little bit. The Araby forces didn't really have any of those same problems. You can see the desert riders on the left there and the camels on the right advancing up the flanks. The general looking on. I love that figure that Dave's got there of the elephant. The elephant stand can actually pop off of that circular base and fit onto a regular stand if he wants to detach the general or make him just part of a unit. Very nice. Here's the other elephants. Very scary when they charge you in combat. Over on the flank, the carpets and the desert riders taking the flank, but a little bit delayed there. The carpets don't count as flyers, they count as cavalry. So they're a little bit different, not what you'd normally expect for something that nominally is flying. In the second turn, the undead, the Tomb Kings, pushing forward. Again, the centre lagging behind, and that left the big block of infantry in the middle there rather exposed. And as the Araby forces moved up, things were about to get nasty. Carrion charged into the carpets. They didn't take too long to kill them off. The carpets only have one melee attack. They're really designed for shooting and harassing the enemy. Over on the side here, the cavalry charged into the camels, and this should have been okay. Took 2 shots on the way in and managed to raise some dead up and behind. However, the combat worked out in the end to be a draw. Those skeleton cavalry definitely didn't pull their weight. And so after realigning and pulling back and so on and so forth, these were the positions which allowed the camels to attack the cavalry in the flank the next turn. So this was the position at the end of Undead turn 3. A little bit of shooting, a little bit of confusion, but that charge on the right really didn't come off. And here was the counter charge from Araby. So you can see the camels on the right getting stuck into the cavalry over there. They did quite a bit of damage. And in the center, the Sultan's Guard charged into that large block of infantry in the middle. The infantry there didn't last too long. The Sultan's Guard cut most of them down. However, they did leave them in a position where maybe there could be a countercharge here. And that's kind of what happened in the next turn. I sent the cavalry and chariots that I'd not yet committed into some knights, which were over on the side there. Tried to move up on the left flank, as you can see, and some more chariots into the camels over there that had beaten up some of the cavalry. But this wasn't looking too bad for the Tomb Kings at this stage, despite the collapse of most of the center. If the cavalry and the chariots could pull their weight, we could probably pull this one out. After the next phase and the Araby taking out the infantry in the center and then falling back, and similarly cavalry and chariots taking out their opponents and falling back, we were in a position something like this, not looking too bad. The elephants are lurking just behind that rather large bushy outcropping on the right, so they were going to come into play next turn. And here they go, charging into some cavalry here. The cavalry and the elephants ended up drawing the combat 6 each. And so while the cavalry took a lot of losses, the elephants weren't able to follow up. They just had to pull back. And here's where they ended up, trying to get into the flanks of the chariots, relying on the fact that the undead don't have initiative and can't countercharge them quite so easily with that damaged stand of cavalry. In the center, the Sultan's Guard again charged into the flank of some chariots that weren't very well positioned and eventually beat them up and killed them off by running them into those walls there. And then over on the side, archers and spearmen charged out to take on the Sphinx. This was a long and involved battle. I think it took place over 3 rounds of combat across 2 different turns. But in the end, the Sphinx just got steadily surrounded. Even though more undead were raised into this combat, the Sphinx couldn't win and eventually fell down. Sultan's Guard again charging through and taking out another brigade that was in the middle of the table. And at the end of the battle, this is where things stood. A very bloody battle, lots of things falling on each side, and so victory to the Araby. The Arabians only took a few casualties here. They took about 4.5 or 5 units. They were losing a lot of single stands-off units, but not enough to count for breakpoints there. However, the Tomb Kings took, I think it was 12 or 13 on their breakpoint, which I believe was 12, so thoroughly beaten there by the forces of Araby. Okay, on to the second game where Craig brought his Dark Elves down and again took on the Tomb Kings, this time at 1250 points. That was just the amount of Dark Elves that Craig had on hand. So here we can see another big line of Tomb Kings facing off against two kind of sections, if you want to call it that, of Dark Elves. The Dark Elves only had two commanders here. They had their general and a hero. And so here's the Dark Elves army from Craig, nicely painted up, not in same sort of livery that I painted my Dark Elves, but very, very nice. They look very cohesive as a force. First turn, the Tomb Kings took first turn again because they lost the scouting roll, mostly moving up, one brigade of skeletons at the back there, lagging behind. And then the Dark Elves moving up as well. Now, actually, the Dark Elves blundered their very first order. Fortunately, their general had the Scepter of Sovereignty to cancel that out. The Cold Ones, not moving though, they kind of got a little stuck at the back there. Tomb Kings moving up, taking the hill. You can see all of the Tomb King cavalry is on the left, and then the hill is providing kind of a center blocking position. And on the right, they're facing off against Cold Ones in the distance. So is this a good move or not? Well, those Cold Ones did try to charge in. They only got one unit into contact there, and that might have been the mistake. They were perhaps a little bit impetuous, and they actually got beaten off. Now, that didn't put them in a very good position for follow-up turns. And in the follow-up, the Tomb Kings moved all of the cavalry force with 2 orders right to the opposite flank, leaving the hill there as kind of a pivot point, and then trying to sweep around the right here. The skeletons charged into the flank of the Cold Ones. Another brigade just maneuvered up to behind those Cold Ones. They didn't actually contact them. The idea there being that if they can drive the Cold Ones back, they'll be forced into enemy and eliminated. And that's pretty much what happened. Over on the side here, some shooting drove back some of the Dark Elf units. And then, as mentioned, on the right here, the skeletons dealt with those Cold One Knights. The one with the little semicircular marker there is another raised unit. Craig really hates raised units of skeletons. I was talking about them a bit during the game. This was the first one to appear. The Dark Elves there failed their charge roll with the Cold One Knights, so they just fell back with a half-pace move. Otherwise, not too much movement. The Harpies in the middle of the field there. And then the Tomb Kings charged in, surrounded that unit of Cold Ones on the side, again raised another unit of undead, and the Carrion, I think it was. Oh, no, it wasn't the Carrion. Sorry, shooting eliminated most of the Harpies that were in the middle of the board, drove them back about 25 centimeters, but didn't kill them. And so by the time the Tomb Kings had taken out those Cold One Riders on the flank, this was kind of the position. It's still a fairly solid, cohesive line for the Tomb Kings, although their cavalry failed orders and are lagging at the back there. Now, I decided to charge the Sphinx in alone against Cold One Riders about a turn later. I wasn't sure how this would go, so I just tried it. I did send in one unit of skeletons in support there. Actually, I think they were raised skeletons. Yes, they were raised skeletons. But this was just to see how tough that Sphinx was and what he could do. Ended up eliminating one stand of Cold One Riders in the combat, but didn't kill off those Cold Ones. And so here's where things stood at the end of that combat phase, at the end of that turn. You can see the 3 semicircular marked units there. Those are all raised dead. They're right out in front. They're going to be the targets of the Dark Elf initiative charges. They're going to soak up the damage, and they're worth no victory points. And this was the Dark Elf response. There were lots of initiative charges. On the right there in the built-up area, the Witch Elves took on some skeletons that were raised, got them in the flank. Okay, on the left, some more Witch Elves charged the Sphinx. In the center at the top, the Cold Ones and a unit of Spearmen charged into the front of a unit that was raised. And in the middle, just below that, the Dark Elf Crossbowmen flank charged a brigade involving, including bowmen and spears. So lots of combats going on here. Now, this one was kind of interesting. The way that the combats resolved, there were lots of chances to advance and to bring units into existing combat. So while there were 3 different combats there, I think we ended up fighting a total of 5 rounds with no unit fighting more than 2 rounds of combat. It was rather interesting. But at the end of the day, the Sphinx got completely surrounded there. The Cold Ones charged in to support the crossbowmen. And the Sphinx eventually went down in that little combat there. I think he took 19 hits, but then the dice rolls on the right, you can say he saved 17, I think it was, or 15 of those hits. Only the 2 2s at the bottom were the wounds taken. However, that was enough. He's completely surrounded and was eliminated. But yeah, that Sphinx was tough. The Witch Elves then pursued in here, and this combat ended pretty quickly. And then here's Craig redeploying. You can see the Witch Elves on the right there. They managed to take out both of those units of Raised Dead and clean up all of those built-up areas there. And so this is where things stood after Craig had maneuvered his units and those Witch Elves had cleaned things up. But here they're ripe for a countercharge. And that's exactly what happened. So the cavalry made 2 orders, charged through the middle, the carrion charged into the bolt throwers at the back, and some skeletons charged into the flank of the Witch Elves. And that pretty much summed it up. After some of those combats were done, Craig had reached his break point. And so it was victory to the Tomb Kings. Very enjoyable games, though. Enjoyed both of those. And even Craig, with some of his blunders and other things not going right for him, still had a lot of fun. And really, that's what Warmaster's all about. So I hope you enjoyed taking a quick look at those battles and some of the figures that were involved. That's all for today, but we'll see you again real soon.